Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 crazy marketing decisions by Coca-Cola. Now just before we get into the video today, one of our regular contributors, Carl Smallwood, who actually wrote the script for this video, has just started his own YouTube channel. It's called Fact Fiend. If you like the stuff that we put together, plenty of it's written by him, so I really think you'll dig his channel, Fact Fiend. I'm going to put a link to it in the description below, so I would love it if you went and checked it out. And now on with today's video. Coca-Cola has been around for a long time, so it's no surprise that they've made their fair share of marketing blunders over the years. What is surprising is just how easy it was for us to research 10 of them to write about in this video. So we'll start with that time that number 10, Coke released Tab Clear just to screw over Pepsi. Tab Clear was a clear version of Tab Cola released during a dark period of the 90s when soft drink manufacturers thought people would prefer clear cola instead of the healthy shade of brown we all know and love. Tab Clear was notable for its remarkably short lifespan, being on shelves for only a few months before being abruptly discontinued. As it turns out, this was a deliberate move by Coca-Cola to screw over Pepsi. You see, Coca-Cola wanted to torpedo sales of Crystal Pepsi and realized that they could do so by releasing a similar drink that pretty much sucked. Specifically, Coke had data showing that the public at that time wasn't all that interested in diet soft drinks, so they decided to make a clear version of Tab a Diet Cola. The idea was that the public, after seeing Tab Clear being marketed as sugar-free soda, would similarly assume that Crystal Pepsi was also a diet drink, and well, it worked. Within 6 months of Tab Clear's release, both drinks were discontinued. In other words, Coke once invented an entirely new drink just to dunk on Pepsi after realizing the former had spent millions of dollars trying to create a new product that they couldn't be bothered to compete with. Say what you want, that's some dedicated corporate penis waving right there. Number 9, the MagiCan, or the can that smelled like farts. Coke, like many companies, has utilized giveaways in the past to try and raise sales or promote a new product, and for the most part, they go off without a hitch. The release of the MagiCan, well, that wasn't one of those times. In a nutshell, Coke launched a campaign which involved hiding money inside of random cans of their product. To prevent the money from being soaked in brown sugar liquid, Coke invented and patented a special kind of can that sported a small reservoir where the money would be stored and a mechanism that would eject the money as soon as the can was opened. The rest of the can was filled with a solution that smelled like eggy farts in order to give the same weight as a regular can. From this description alone, you can probably guess where this is going. The divider that kept the money separate from the liquid failed in many cans, which meant that countless Coke fans ended up with money that smelled like farts. Also, one kid drank some and was rushed to the hospital. He was totally fine, but the media reported on the story as if he had died, a rumor that still persists to this day. This led to Coke entering damage control mode. Coca-Cola never marked which cans contained money, so people couldn't cheat, so they didn't actually know which ones had the chloride solution, meaning that they had to recall every can that had been released for several weeks. Number 8. That time they tried to sell tap water to the British public. Ask a spokesperson from Coke to tell you about Dasani water before it gets bottled, and you could be led to believe that they filter pure glacier water through an angel's silk underwear and pump it full of unicorn farts with the long-winded explanation they'd probably offer. Ask a chemist, on the other hand, and they'll tell you that Dasani is just tap water the company filters an extra time, puts in a bottle, and sells for a 20,000% markup. While this tactic does apparently work fine in the United States, when Coke tried to launch Dasani in the UK in 2004, well, things did not exactly go to plan. For one thing, the public didn't exactly appreciate that the company was trying to sell public water to, well, the public. When Coca-Cola tried to claim that their special filtration process made Dasani purer than tap water, the people in charge of British tap water tested it and found that the filtration process didn't do anything. Oh, except for increase the amount of a chemical called bromate, which can cause cancer. This surprised the testers, since British tap water doesn't even contain a trace amount of this chemical, meaning Coke's special filtration process somehow managed to increase the amount of a potentially cancer-causing chemical in ordinary tap water by, well, infinity%. As a final blunder, the company tried to market Dasani as being full of spunk, without running a cursory Urban Dictionary check on that word, which would have informed them that in the UK, spunk is slang for semen. Number 7. Coke Zero is marketed at men because Coke accidentally made Diet Coke a girl's drink. As discussed in a previous entry, there was a time when Joe Public wasn't all that interested in diet or low-sugar drinks. What we didn't mention, however, is that pretty much the entire reason this is the case is because Coke spent decades marketing diet soda to only 50% of the population. Specifically, Coke spent years marketing Diet Coke as a girl's drink. This was a particular problem in 2010 when people started realizing that not dying of diabetes was pretty awesome. So Coca-Cola had to invent a new drink that they could sell to men. That drink was, well, of course, Coke Zero, a low-calorie soda Coke specifically tried to market without ever using the word diet because their company had spent millions of dollars and years telling customers that only women bought diet sodas. Essentially, Coke backed themselves into a corner by so aggressively targeting women with Diet Coke that they had to create basically the same drink again and spend millions telling men that it's okay to drink it. Oh, and speaking of diet soda, number 6. Funding scientists to say that Coke doesn't cause obesity. If you asked 100 nutritionists if cutting sugary drinks out of your diet would help you with losing weight or improving your overall health, 99 of them would say, well, yeah. Statistically, though, 1 would tell you that sugary drinks had nothing to do with obesity because, well, they were being paid by Coca-Cola to say so. You see, despite the link between a poor diet and being unhealthily overweight being so clear you could read the paper through it, Coke decided to try and muddy the waters just a little by paying scientists to downplay the role that diet plays in obesity. Said scientists, after cashing their checks from Coke, eventually released a statement saying that exercise was more important than diet when it came to the issue of obesity. This insinuated that a poor, presumably Coke-filled diet can be counteracted by exercise. While no expert is going to argue that exercise doesn't play a key role in health, diet is way more important when it comes to maintaining a healthy body weight, at least according to, well, every nutrition expert not being paid by Coca-Cola. For anyone who wants a more visceral example of the role Coke specifically plays in the obesity problem, just remember that they once, number 5, released an ad of obnoxious white people handing Coke to indigenous Mexican people. The people of Mexico have a love-hate relationship with Coca-Cola. Now, on the one hand, the country consumes more of the product than even Americans. On the other, it's been directly linked to the country's rising obesity rates to the point that they've actually managed to approve a tax on sugary drinks. Meanwhile, over in America, they can't even limit the size of soda cups, so, you know, Mexico, well, it has to be pretty desperate. It's hard to illustrate just how popular soda is in Mexico, so we'll just quote a few statistics to give you some basic idea. Now, according to pediatricians, 80% of 2-year-olds and 10% of newborns are bottle-fed some kind of soda, and the average adult drinks 36 gallons of the stuff every single year. Unsurprisingly, this love of soda has led to a sharp spike in obesity rates in Mexico, with doctors and health officials squarely pointing a significant portion of the blame at the aggressive marketing of soda to the populace by companies like Coca-Cola. Apparently, the only part of this that Coca-Cola executives noticed was that Mexico loves Coca-Cola, which is presumably why the company released an ad of painfully obnoxious white people handing out Coca-Cola to an indigenous Mexican community. Apparently, Coca-Cola remained totally oblivious to the offense this could cause until someone in Mexico pointed it out. Now, on the subject of marketing a product that's terrible for you, well, we've got Number 4. Coke once openly admitted vitamin water is terrible for you. Few words in tandem could seem more innocent than vitamin water. Neither word is dangerous, and when they're put together, they sound downright awesome, like kitten party or chicken nugget. According to Coke, though, you're an idiot if you think that a product called vitamin water is in any way good for you. Just to be clear, Coke once said in open court that no consumer could reasonably be misled into thinking vitamin water was a healthy beverage. You know, that product that claimed it could help cure cancer before Coke bought it in 2007. Despite Coke admitting that vitamin water is a terrible, awful drink with no discernible health benefits, the company continues to market it as being chock full of awesome body-healing nutrients and vitamins because apparently a reasonable consumer expects to just be lied to all of the time, which, well, actually that sounds pretty accurate. Number 3. That time Coke kind of called Nazi Germany the good old times in an advert. As we've discussed in detail before, a number of companies are guilty of aiding or at least supporting the Third Reich during World War II by selling them products and services while they committed numerous heinous atrocities. Among those companies was Coca-Cola, who, due to an embargo on the usual syrup used to create their flagship drink, added orange syrup instead, creating Fanta. Nowadays, Fanta is one of Coke's most popular products, and for the most part, the company is incredibly coy when it comes to mentioning that the product was invented so their company could continue to turn a profit in Nazi Germany. Except, well, of course, for that time in 2015 that they actually published an ad for Fanta celebrating the 75th anniversary of its creation in Germany with a tagline reading, "Bring the good old times back." Now here's the part where it gets weird. It's already pretty insulting to the average consumer that Coke assumed nobody would be able to subtract 75 from 2015 and realize that Fanta was invented when Hitler was in power, but the company actually released this ad in Germany. A spokesperson from Coca-Cola tried to quickly quell the fires of controversy by stating that their product may have been invented in Nazi-era Germany, but it certainly didn't have anything to do with Hitler or the Nazis. No, they just took Nazi money and then quietly pocketed all of the profits at the end of the war, which is obviously much better. Number 2, paying a company to take over people's Facebook statuses with predictable results. Countless companies have tried to utilize social media or teenage lingo in a sad and pretty desperate attempt to appear hip, and it's inevitably a cringeworthy disaster that leaves a worse taste in everyone's mouth than a 4-day-old Big Mac. Which is presumably why, in 2010, Coke outsourced a social media advertising campaign to a company who specialized in it. By which we mean everyone who worked there was an immature jackass. Basically, the company Coke hired, Lean Mean Fighting Machine, was asked to run a campaign on behalf of the Dr. Pepper brand, where they'd post embarrassing Facebook statuses on behalf of volunteers who'd be entered into a draw for a chance to win $1,000. The theme of the campaign was, what's the worst that could happen? And it's for moments like this that irony was invented. Soon after the campaign started, Lean Mean Fighting Machine began posting statuses on behalf of bored Dr. Pepper fans as side-splittingly hilarious as "What's wrong with peeing in the shower?" and "I watched 2 girls, 1 cup and felt hungry afterwards." If you're not familiar as to why that last one might be an issue, well, hi there, whoever you're watching this with, because they know. When the mother of one unsuspecting teenage girl who'd entered the contest googled 2 girls, 1 cup to see what it was, mummy blogs across the net went into meltdown and Coke was forced to apologize for something they absolutely should have seen coming. Number 1, New Coke. Of course, New Coke has to be on this list. It's the marketing decision that Coke has never stopped being made fun of for, even though New Coke was better in every conceivable way. Wait, well, what? Now, the story of New Coke that most people are familiar with who are watching this is in the 1980s, Coke changed the formula for their drink. This failed dramatically, and they were forced to bring back old Coke. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about New Coke being a ploy to replace the sugar with high-fructose corn syrup, or that it was a deliberate effort to reinvigorate the brand, both of which aren't true. In reality, Coke just wanted to make a better version of their product, and they actually succeeded. New Coke won in blind taste tests, and was somewhat better for you than the original Coca-Cola, since the recipe was based on that of Diet Coke. The problem, though, as is often the case in the world of business, was entitled customers. Early blind taste tests were often sabotaged by single angry customers who took offense to the idea of Coke's taste being changed even if they personally preferred New Coke, and when New Coke was released, small groups of angry fans kicked up a fuss and generally acted like spoiled children who were having their toys taken away. The backlash was so fierce for New Coke, which remember beat out original Coke in every single taste test conducted by the company, that Coke had to hire a professional psychiatrist to listen in on calls from angry Coke fans to see if they could figure out what the deal was. The psychiatrist left after one day and said that the only time he'd seen people so distressed was when they were dealing with the death of a family member. Faced with overwhelming negative press from the change, Coke killed the new flavor that everyone preferred and brought back the original formula as Coke Classic. This, of course, led to an explosion of sales for Coke and record profits for that quarter. So, to recap, in the 1980s, Coke tried to introduce a better-tasting, healthier version of Coca-Cola, and then they were forced to recall it because customers insisted on only drinking the worse version. Well, with that in mind, can we really complain when they treat us like idiots? So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And as I mentioned at the top of the video, please do go check out Carl's channel. It's called Fact Fiend. There is a link in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching.